these are the things that set live performance apart, of the interaction, the interplay of the audiences. And, being in a performance that one time when, all the cylinders are firing off, it's a magical moment. And like what you're describing, the ability to, even in a bad play, to capture a sense of wonder or delight, of the unexpected.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings and welcome to the Anadromous. This is Burn Power coming to you from TBILISI GEORGIA on a wonderfully dark, kind of drippy midwinter day. The kind of days I love. And what we're going to do today is something a little different. I had a dialogue, an Anadromous dialogue, with James White in Texas, and he got in touch with me a while ago, and I realized he was following several of my channels, particularly this one and Gravity from Above, and so that makes him officially the person who, as a puppeteer, kind of understands much of the kind of things that I understand doing puppetry and why that's important to me. So we're going to what I did was I woke up this morning. Do you like the candlelight? I woke up this morning and nice and early to contact him. And at the same time, I did my first ever live stream on Gravity from Above, a channel which has 1,500 subscribers. Not a peep out of them, though, as I kind of expected, because I don't show up there very often in a kind of a personal way. It's more for documents and such. Nevertheless, I wanted to do something there, and a version of this, the complete version of this live stream is over there. It's not much different than this one. Anyway, just to remind you, we are doing, I'm definitely soliciting your kindness to help support the massive weight on top of me of getting my massive library here from Haines, Alaska, all the way 12 time zones to Georgia. So you'll hear me mention this in there. This is not, unless you're hearing this in, I don't know, May of this year, 2024, it's active. I need your help. So we are closing in on the last $4,000 of the fundraiser. It gets tiring doing this, but nevertheless, I'm going to do this till the end. And I've got some serious deadlines coming up because I've heard that the shipping will take longer than I thought. It's going to take 2 to 3 months, which will put it at the very end of the period in which I can use my residence permit. So please consider helping. Meanwhile, let's go and talk with James about puppet theory and the material world. The Nakauri sisters doing a fairly recent folk song. I think it was only composed about, 10 years ago or so. But, which is, of course, many Georgians will say that's not a folk song because it was composed and not passed on. But particularly hardy Georgian girls there, because of my observation of Georgian girls, at least down here in the valley, which is still, I don't know, what are we about? 600 meters, 1,200 feet up, is still quite, much warmer, and Georgians tend to walk around huddling and freezing. So looks like James is there, and we're going to invite James on right now. Go ahead, James.
Oh, hey, Bern, how you doing?
Well, it's my morning. It's your your evening.
Yeah,
you're in America, and I am not. So, how are you doing?
Doing all right. That was a beautiful song. What is the string instrument they were using?
That's a panduri. And there's a bigger one called the chonguri, which is kind of the bass instrument, but not fully. It just has deeper strings, but it's not super low. Yeah, it's one of the Georgian instruments, and it's not hard to play. It's tuned like a dulcimer or something like that, where you have an odd, like if you just press your fingers across, I think it's like the key of G or something like that.
You still have to manage to have some rhythm, you know.
Exactly. So no, the Georgians are very good at rhythm, and even when they're singing, it's very implied, and they often do things where they have a lot of dynamics, and the song will start off one way, and then will kick into high gear or something like that. And I've seen some things. Now, I don't have that much. I have some puppet videos here that I will use for little breaks and such. I have a couple other music videos, one from the Czech Republic, French, stuff like that. It occurred to me I needed to get a little bit more Georgian music on this, but we'll start off with that. The way this is going to work is I'm pretty sure nobody is watching yet, and we are alone, so to speak. If anyone is out there, well, I'm pretty sure it's like two watching. One is me, one is you. So if anyone else does come aboard, it'll be later. Like I said, this is my first experiment with this. So what we'll do is just talk and have some puppet-like discussions.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about life in Georgia or whatever's going on that seems worth talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe it would be interesting. I mean, you got in touch with me. You've watched the other channel, the Anadromous, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I think I came to you with the discussion on gravity from above, but I think I'm on everything that you have.
Yeah, cool. Are you on Georgian Crossroads? Do you go there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Very good. So why don't you explain? Obviously, there's a lot of information out there on how I got interested in puppetry, but why don't you explain a little bit about your interest in puppetry?
Well, it's that whole story that you don't like. My generation is completely
Muppets?
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Jim Henson, and like the Captain Kangaroo, and in Texas we had Mr. Peppermint, and I know that you were in a bit of it. Might be a little bit after your time, but you were familiar with a band called. Let's say the Back End Surfers.
Yeah. The Derriere Surfers.
Yeah. Mr. Peppermint is Gibby, the lead singer's dad. So he had a children's show in Dallas, Texas that was in syndication.
Does that explain everything?
I don't know if it explains everything, but it sure gives a lot. a wealth of information to the surreal quality of what's going on. But yeah, so for me, it was, of course, like I said, Jim Henson and those sort of things. I did. I grew up in a evangelical Baptist church, so we had a puppet ministry, and so.
And your puppet ministry looked like Muppets, right?
Right. Felton foam.
And I often express antipathy to the Muppets, although I remember them as a kid. I'm older than you, and I remember them as a kid on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they were a little edgier then. They were a little more surreal. And then once the Sesame Street thing got started, then it took on a whole different aspect. But I don't begrudge anyone for coming in through the Muppet door, because for an American, what other doors have you got?
Well, right. I mean, that is the mass door. But, you also, if you were big into the puppets, you try to digest everything that Jim Henson produced, and that puts you into, he was the Henson family's been phenomenal at advocating for world puppetry and donating to Unima, and really trying to introduce. Like the Muppet Show is really most of where I feel my introduction or fascination with puppetry, and he would most assuredly be taking nods from other people's form of puppetry and just putting them in fleece and foam. He was looking at other people's movements, and and so like the introduction to Mummenschanz was through that. But yeah, I ran a puppet ministry through high school, and my degree is in sculptural ceramics, but with a minor in theater. And so like one of my first dreams was just to go to UConn and do puppetry, because it seems like a good marriage. And it always hangs out in the background. But
did you go there?
No, I didn't. No.
Right.
Actually, I looked into, they have a graduate certificate program, but it's all online, and it's not all online simultaneously. It's this new system of, you record something and someone critiques, and
right.
And I don't think that's it wasn't the way for me.
No, I think that's going to be a real problem for something like puppets. I mean, that is, as you know from following my thoughts, that is probably the opposite of the way you could understand puppetry. The most you could do is see the form of the puppet and get a bit of an idea of the message, but you couldn't get a tactile idea of the puppet in three-dimensional space and how the person uses it. And there are so many. It's like watching, grading ballet online. It's just not the way it's meant to be seen. Not that, if it was puppet animation, that's a different thing, obviously.
Right.
So, but yeah. So I'm guessing at a certain point, obviously, you got interested in puppets. You were doing something through your church ministry. How did it deepen? Because it seems to me, just from our communications, that you have a deeper interest in it. When did that start to happen?
Well, like I said, my degree is in fine arts, and so I've always had, a sense of if art is, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. I'll say it this way, and then I'll probably redo it. But if art is objectively good, if a story is good, it does speak to in my instance, a Judeo-Christian background. If a story is good, it speaks to truth, and truth speaks well of greater things in faith and all that kind of stuff. So, for me, I don't like I mean, I'm not a glib or didactic fan. Not saying that you can't have something go that route, but so I did find the kind of the church ministry a little lacking. I'm not going to begrudge it, but it was an opportunity. One of the guys who was running it before I did, his brother was working with Jim Henson in LA and sent him over. He came to visit us in Texas, and we had a great workshop time. It was a great experience. And so, I mean, those kind of things deepen. But like you, I mean, you have, I think, you've mentioned many times this fascination with texture. And, because you like Stinkmeyer and because you like the Quay brothers, that texture does not limit itself to the physicality of the puppet, but to the movement of the puppet also. And so the beauty of movement in object theater is very attractive to me. The idea of agency of a performer being cast upon an object is a point of performance of interest to me. I've always been a fan more of like Meyerhold's biomechanics or the Russian constructivist movement and the German expressionist. I like the idea of, not this navel gazing kind of acting form that is method acting, but more the expressive of how do I project out what is within. And puppets lends itself very well to that.
Did you have a chance to listen to my recent video on theatrical beings in a fictional space? Yeah,
I did.
Yeah, those the works of looking at E. Gordon Craig and Tadeusz Kantor, who are both very important theorists, as well as Kantor had more involvement with the actual production of plays, but Gordon Craig also had. He did some things, but he was more of, I think, a bit of a dilettante, but had his a very active dilettante, but had his ideas that were, I think, more important than anything for him. And but the thing that struck me about Tadeusz Kantor was that he was saying that he'd gone through Craig's ideas, and that Craig's ideas had gone through constructivism and Meyerhold and such. But then he was looking at after a while that you come to a certain kind of an orthodoxy in the avant-garde, where it after a while, and I think what he's talking about is modernism, the breaking down of elements into their constituent components until you can no longer break them down. Something like Beckett's play. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's about a minute long, called Breath or something like that, One Breath. And it's just basically a construction on a stage of kind of almost like a garbage pile. And it has some sound effects, and at the end you hear like I think it's a baby's voice or something like that, or it's just a breath, but it's a recording. But that's like, the absolute reduction of that. And Tadeusz Kantor's point was, while the avant-garde was doing all of that, standing in the corner, and they'd taken some cues from the marionette, and Craig was pointing this way, was the mannequin, or he uses the word mannequin for like dummy or puppet or, marionette. And what Craig called the Uberman marionette, the actor who becomes more like, the masked figure from a Greek tragedy. But I thought that was really fascinating, just on a theoretical level. I mean, we probably just plunged off the the deep end of puppetry here, but we are doing a fundraiser, but then again, we're the only ones watching. So,
well, I think that that whole idea, you were bringing in like the comedy dell'arte and these stock characters, and to me, that's one of the interesting things about the puppet. I mentioned earlier the word agency, and you design a puppet, or a puppet has a particular expression or face or style that it's been sculpted and designed in, and that in particular lends itself to particular character choices for the actor to bring. And so in that, the puppet kind of has an agency separate from the actor. Mm-hmm. And that actually made me think about something I wanted to ask you about, which is, in our modern times, there's this popular trend, and we've seen it in like Bun Raku and all that kind of stuff, for the puppeteer to be more present on the stage and to have more presence on the stage. And I'm curious as to some of your thoughts on the puppeteer being present on the stage.
Right. Well, I kind of go two different ways on it. One, obviously, I'm in favor of it, and two, I wonder about it, yeah. And I'm in favor of it because I think for people who aren't so exposed to the concept, it's a novel approach. And I think this would be more true in America for an audience who's never seen something like that. It would make them go, oh, what's happening here? And obviously, the American scene. Most Americans have very little contact with puppetry. Generally, the categories for American puppetry in the mind of the general audience, not in the mind of American puppeteers. But basically there are Muppets, there's some kind of like folk marionettes. The real clever person would see that King Kong was a puppet of sorts. And, they might have seen some parade puppets somewhere, mm-hmm. kind of bread and puppets, maybe, the Halloween parade in New York City with its kind of, hoisted puppets. But beyond that, the average American probably doesn't go to puppet theaters. When I took my one weird tour across America for 2 months back in 2009, and we did a combination of things. We did hidden puppets, we did shadow puppets, we did object theater, we did marionettes, we did puppets in front and puppets behind. And it was kind of like a big smorgasbord of ideas. And what I got from people who were watching, it was, I would say this, it was a smorgasbord. Well, it was kind of a smorgasbord of ideas, but it was a smorgasbord of styles too.
Yeah.
But I was doing that on purpose because I wanted people to get an idea of what puppets can do. And I was very happy to learn that most people in America had never seen such a thing. And when we came into town with our very strange show, which was called The Great Ziggurat, which was based on images from the Tower of Babel, but it also had all sorts of other tower metaphors in it, like, Rapunzel and Vertigo and all of these other, King Kong and all these other cultural signifiers. But it was also, I had a friend who, part of what he was contributing was Nimrod's dream about language, and so he did this as shadow puppets and such. And we also did things where we had all these historical figures. So we had Edgar Allan Poe as one of the characters, and he was talking with Jung, which was a pretty fascinating thing. And I actually had people come up to me at the end of one show and said, was that F. Scott Fitzgerald? Or no, was that William Faulkner? And he goes, no, that was Edgar Allan Poe. And he turns to his friend and said, I told you. And I said, that's exactly what I wanted. Is I wanted something you could follow what was going on. It wasn't particularly abstract. It's just that the kitchen sink was thrown into the mix. It was like everything. It was you. The more you understood about history and could make connections, the more you would get out of it. And but what was great about doing that was most people had never seen anything like what we were doing. And one of the things I thought, and I still think about puppetry in America, is that you can. Right now, it's an open field. If you can figure out how to tour or how to do things, and many people were saying, if I'd known what this was, I would have brought a lot more people. So, if you think about music, in the field of music right now, if you start doing music, as soon as you go to play somewhere, people are going to see you something like, so what kind of music do you do? And you're going to say something like, fill in the blank, country or electronic or alt rock or, whatever, heavy metal or, jazz, whatever. And then they're going to say, oh, you play there. We have a slot for you. And whereas as soon as the only question people would ask was, is this for children? And I would, because it wasn't not for children, I would just say, well, they could come. And I did have children attend on occasion. They were just mystified, I'm sure. But, they saw these little characters doing things. So because of that, people were saying, wow. But as a puppeteer, I could do things. It was like in music, like I said, the field has been explored quite a bit. But in puppetry, this is my whole point about puppetry as an antidote art. The field still, many puppeteers know a lot and say, well, a lot has been done. But not if you're, if you're in the audience, no, they haven't seen a lot. And so that was my point, is that there's a lot there. So my feeling about the puppeteer now, if I go to Europe, in Europe, they've seen a lot of that puppeteer on the stage. So here in Tbilisi, every time I go to a puppet theater here, it's on, the actor is on the stage with the puppeteer. And they have certain tropes they use over and over, including they tend to do everything with recorded sound, which is a little weird to me, like even the voices and such. And I would rather they didn't, but I can't speak into their world that much. But I almost think here they might be better off going towards having more, it might be more surprising to have more hidden puppeteers. And I got the same message from Nina Malikova in the Czech Republic, who's the daughter of Jan Malik, who was a very important person in Czech puppetry, really got Unimog going again after World War II. And she said, they had really were some of the ones to break the ground on that, particularly in the 1970s, people like Josef Krofta. But she said to me, now there are people starting to be hidden again. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I said, we don't have that situation in America because, people just don't see that much puppetry. It's such a big country. And there's only, maybe you can think, I don't know what you know about the situation, but this is the places I can think of in America that have puppetry. New York City, Vermont, the Southern California area, North Carolina. There's the Puppet Center in Atlanta, but is there that much puppetry in Atlanta? So that's about it. I don't know. Maybe.
The Carolinas, from the, back from the days of, what was it, the Black Mountain College that was there. There was a beautiful folk movement that had kind of still kind of carries these rhythms of older art forms, even though they're done more modern. But there's a lot of people doing just like really interesting things. But like you said, if you were going to a place to say, I want to see puppetry, I mean, you could argue Storrs, Connecticut, which is where UConn is, because they have a museum there and they regular have things. But like New York really is the scene. But if we're talking about the Americas, I mean, there's Montreal and Quebec have a pretty robust puppetry. But it's really kind of interesting because it does feel like there is a kind of a renaissance of puppetry per se. I mean, that's a big word to use.
More interest.
Right. But but it's breaking in a little bit more where people are recognizing object theater, in the midst of themselves. I mean, if we go and we see, who's being produced, I mean, of course, like, you were talking about introductions into puppetry for people. I think Warhorse was a revolutionary thing when we brought a Handspring company, puppet company from South Africa to design the Warhorse. And, it's this beautiful puppet operated with 3 people. It's a beautiful piece of choreography and movement. But Life of Pi is doing the same thing now with a tiger on stage. Of course, most people, it's those same sort of things where they don't really get to see the people who are kind of pushing boundaries or exploring the art form. They kind of become, like everybody's doing something akin to Warhorse. That's the form is this, life-size Bunraku thing. It's beautiful.
Well, the thing is, part of the problem is that you have a large audience. A general theater, of a Broadway type or whatever, London stage is going to be pretty big. We're not talking off Broadway or something. So as a result, it was Julie Taymor who really first brought some puppet principles into theater with The Lion King. But the point is, you had to make it so everybody could see it. Right. And a good puppet show, I think, if you've got 100 is probably almost too many people. 50 is an ideal size for a puppeteer, but then how do you monetize that? Well, we're going to stop for a moment, and I'm going to play a bit of music and just remind people what we're doing here. And this is obviously mostly for the people who are going to watch this later, because, like I say, this channel, I have over 1,500 subscribers here. But they're not the kind of people who wait for me to do things, and because I just put things out, it's like, oh, I've got a new puppet performance. I've got some Russian puppeteers here. But I'm going to, I'm trying to get my library from Alaska to here, which also includes my puppets. Maybe I'll discuss them more in a minute. But let's play a little bit of something here. This is from a performance here in Tbilisi, Don Quixote, and I'll give you a little idea of what they're doing. This is a couple minutes. We'll be back in a moment or two. And I got James White here from, where are you? You're in Texas?
I'm in Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay, Dallas-Fort Worth area. We'll be back with James in a moment. And I will be using this as, this will be up as a conversation. So.
თუ კი ბოროტება შენს გულში სამუდამოდ დაისადგურა, თუ კი უარყავის სიკეთე და სიყვარული, რაც უზენაესმა გვიბოძა და რითაც გვატარებს ამ წყდიაჩი, თუ კი სხვა ადამიანებში მხოლოდ სიბოროტეს და სიბნელეს ხედავ, ვინაიდან საკუთარ ანარეკლში ხედავ მხოლოდ და მხოლოდ იგივეს, თუ კი უარყავის სიცოცხლე და არსებობათ აქცია ეს ყოფიერება, მაშინ აღარ მაგრამ თუ კი შენს გულში იპოვი იმ ნათელს, რომელიც მოგანიჭებს ძალას, ბუროდებას ებრძოლ. იმედობით დაავადებულები ვარ და ეს შემორაცხვავა გიჟდა. სიკვდილის პროცესს
Okay, so there we are, a little bit of Georgian puppetry for us. And did you like that nice Georgian script there?
Oh, I love that. I love seeing that.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see it in books here. It's got this, especially some of the calligraphy with it is amazing. And I think it's much more, it's just got these lines in it that lends itself to calligraphy. But you can see in that idea there that they have people on the stage. That is very typical Georgian style, where there's kind of like, it's a tabletop kind of modified bunraku style. And so.
Yeah, there's a group down in Austin, Texas that do that sort of tabletop style. That's pretty interesting. They did a really interesting piece years ago. They did Upson Sinclair's The Jungle.
Okay, that's different.
Where the performers were dressed in butcher aprons and, just the standard kind of, style of the air, and they just kind of blended into the background while the foreground puppeteers. I mean, I guess the idea is that, in my mind, as long as everything is in service of the story, it's the same principles with theater that, you may be the main character, the star, if you will, but a good ensemble is always going to be in service to the story, into the show, right, and not unto themselves to make themselves shine.
Right. Which I think is an important principle. One of the things that I like about puppetry is that as far as entertainment and the arts go, it's very humble. That is to say, it's not about the person being seen as, say, what's happened with music, or obviously with movies and all the media on the screen, which it's amazing to me. I watch YouTube thumbnails and covers and such right now. It's amazing how much of it is people's faces, and not just the people's faces they're talking about, but the people's faces who run the channel. And evidently there's this idea that that's what it takes. You have to be yourself, whatever that means. And to me, I sit there and go I almost never put my face on the front. And the reason is because, you're not coming here to hear me as me. I mean, yeah, of course, but you're coming here to learn about an idea. I mean, I don't get stage fright. And one of the reasons I've figured out that I don't is that, when I go and talk or perform for someone, I'm not interested in me. I'm not here to show you me and to be judged on how I look or whatever like that. I'm interested in the ideas. I'm interested in the art. And I think the way social media in particular, but also movies and music has developed, it's all become the individual. Tarkovsky said modern art took a wrong turn as a demonstration of, it becomes about self-expression, which is, as I understand it, the opposite of what Gordon Craig was talking about with the Uber marionette. And evidently, from what I've read about the situation he was reacting to, was there would be Victorian actors who would come on the stage. And as soon as they were on the stage, everyone would applaud, and then the actor would like tip their hat, and just totally having nothing to do with the story, and all about the presence of the great actor, or the point was to become famous. And now that's how many people? Way too many, everyone. So
yeah, we often comment on how, like in Texas, there's a lot of good and interesting, theater going, and there's folks who bring some interesting puppetry through. But we notice that, like, if you go to the Broadway traveling shows or whatever and have to pay, umpteen bazillion dollars or whatever for a ticket, that everyone feels obligated to give a standing ovation in between, like, every single piece. And it's like, really wasn't that, it didn't hit, It's not to say that we're not appreciative. It's not to say that, but, I think you're doing it to buff up, to feel good about how much you paid for this ticket rather than, hey, I wanted to ask you about in Georgia. I'm pretty ignorant just about Georgia in general, but in say Ukraine or Poland, you had this robust history of these. In Ukraine, it was called the Vertep. In Poland, I think it was the Solca or something like that. There were these nativity plays.
Yeah.
And I was curious. Well, what my curiosity is that after the fall of communism, there was this great interest in doing the nativity plays. I was curious if there was something like that. No.
Well, and there's a religious reason for that. Okay. You don't do nativity plays and such like that in the Orthodox tradition. And part of it is they take their Christian imagery really seriously. And even in the general, there are many people here. Georgia is considered a very Orthodox religious country. My own observations is that a lot of that religion is nominal. That is, a lot of people are, if you ask them if they're a Christian, they're like, oh, yes. And then if you see them just acting like whatever, it's not surprising. Having said that, there are many religious people here. And they're very clearly religious in the sense that every time, if you're in a bus and you pass by a church, they will cross themselves at that point. And people take these things very seriously. So in the Orthodox faith, you don't do things like nativity plays. You don't do Easter passion plays. And the reason is they're too holy to do. Now, coming from Protestant America, where I think I once heard of someone doing a communion with like Kool-Aid, grape flavored Kool-Aid. We obviously have gotten way too casual with it all, and we're on the other end of the spectrum. And we could use a little of that mystery and holiness in your basic Protestant church. You walk into a Protestant church. In the recent Hans Ruckmacher video I just put out, the second half of the video is these guys who, not just these guys, but some other people too, who've gone around and taken videos of ruined churches in America. But we're not talking ruined churches like, 19th century clapboard houses, some little abandoned church in the prairie. We're talking about places that, looks like they were here a couple years ago, and they all left the hymn books behind, and left everything behind. And, I would have thought if you're giving up on a church, you'd at least try to get rid of the stuff, sell it, deconsecrated, as it were. But maybe the church was never really consecrated in the first place.
Yeah.
So, but so they don't have that kind of tradition here. Having said that, it's amazing how often Christian themes show up and such. And when I go to the plays here, there's always, you can feel it underneath almost everything, which I find really fascinating. So Solzhenitsyn or Tarkovsky are more like the kind of people you find here who are, you know, they have more of a kind of a latent Christianity in everything. And I remember having an argument with a guy back in Alaska, but he had come from somewhere else, pretty intelligent guy, and he just could not see how Stalker by Tarkovsky, have you seen that?
Yes.
Yeah, he couldn't see how it was Christian. And I tried to explain it, but for him, unless it's spelled out, the message, it wasn't. You know?
Yeah. We've been fortunate.
You know those people in Texas.
Yeah. Well, we've been fortunate. I mean, we you know, I grew up in the Baptist Protestant realm, but we've been in the Anglican realm for a while. So still our foot's firmly in the Protestant side of the house, but a little bit more on the sacramental side now, a little bit more liturgical and a little bit more respect. And and we had a priest who it was a lot of fun because we would do films and have discussions on films and faith. And so we can have the discussion on, you know, like Nacho Libre, how beautifully shot this movie is. But then we can talk about the faith elements, and but we launched that off. I didn't participate in this, but my wife and my son did, which was the Decalogue. And it's I can't, my brain is just missing. Kislovsky, yeah. You know, it's a phenomenal series to go and to look through that and to instigate, like, how are we going to think about this, both in terms of film and in terms of faith.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Krzysztof Kieślowski made a Polish series. I think it was on television in Poland, but he turned two parts of it into a longer film as well. But the Decalogue is the 10 Commandments, and so he did a film for each of the commandments. The first one in particular is very stark. It's about a man who puts all of his faith in science and mathematics, and yet there's a tragedy in the film, and it's kind of like, you know, the man was so trusting in his numbers, and that's the false god for him, is the numbers. Now, Kieślowski is not a person I would say he was always kind of wrestling with his faith. Nevertheless, I would say that there was more of a faith element in that than there is in, say, going to a mega church and all these people with their hands raised. Yeah. And being very emotional about it and singing. There's one song, I think it's a Hill song where they just sing over and over, I believe, I believe, I believe. And I'm sitting there going like, well, if you really believe, you don't have to say that over and over and over again. Like you try to work up, like faith is an emotion. Faith isn't an emotion. It's commitment and time. You know, it's a trust. It's something you build up. So, but, you know, we won't go too far off in that direction. But nevertheless, I think that there is, in Georgia, there isn't that tradition. Nevertheless, I often feel there's a kind of a spiritual emphasis behind an awful lot of the work. And then you find it mixed with really odd elements, some of them even American. Like, for instance, for some reason, Louis Armstrong is really important here. Which is weird because most Americans have forgotten who he is. You know, one of the great early jazz trumpeter. And but more than once I've seen Louis Armstrong show up. Well, evidently, in the Soviet Union, he was always called the ambassador in America, but he went to different places and played. And so because Louis Armstrong was always just kind of a neutral character, he was able to go to the Soviet Union, and as a result, ended up getting embedded here, which is really odd. But so I have these friends who do shadow puppets, and they have a whole series of shadow puppets done as like bears and other animals, where Louis Armstrong is like a bear, and so's Ella Fitzgerald. And they have these conversations, these singing back and forth, and it's based on live performance of Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald, a recording. And somehow at the end, it ends up where they die and go to heaven. And it's just this amazing, like this weird thing that you would never see this in America, that kind of a way. So like I said, the kind of faith ideas are underneath everything. And that's one thing. When I invited people to come to Georgia last year, and I got 6 takers, all men, youngish men from, we'll say 20 to under 40. And they were really surprised. And there were people, it was all Western Europe and America. Let's see, and we had Latvia, Netherlands, Switzerland, couple from America, Israel also, one guy from Israel. But they were all surprised because there was a unity and a cohesiveness to Georgian culture, which even the Georgians don't really fully recognize. They're attracted by the West. And I had a conversation with them, and my friends, the Georgians and my friends, and the Georgians were all expressing this, ooh, wouldn't it be great to go to America? And they all want to go to New York City. Guys, you don't make enough in a year here to afford an apartment for a month in New York City. You don't understand. Let's stop there for a moment, play another song. People I notice people come in for a few minutes and then leave. I think it's because this concept here on this channel is new. We don't do this here. But the point of this live feed is to basically, I'm trying to raise funds to get my library here. And it's a heavy library. It's got to travel 12 time zones in a container. I have to go back to Alaska to get it. I've got a $12,000 goal. We're over $8,000 right now.
That's great.
And this is a board that shows what I've been doing, and right now I've gotten different things. We got the $6,000 container cost. We got $2,000 to get the container from Alaska to Seattle, where it will then go across the oceans. Now I'm working on the $2,000 I will need to get trucks, trains in Georgia from the coast to get that to my door, and going through the most perilous thing of all, customs. And then I've got, after that, I have to work on the plane ticket to go back and forth, which will be another $2,000. So right now I need $1,646 to get to my $2,000 goal. Okay, since I don't have people, there's nobody watching. But like I say, people will watch later. And I might put this up on the other channel too, just because it's a nice conversation and I think people should be exposed to it. But I think that we will get there. And I'm doing this just because, I need to. And if you're watching this at some point later, as long as it's not March, which I will probably be in Alaska by then, although I could probably use the money because this is the shoestring budget, the $12,000. I'm sure I'm going to be very tight on all of this. So feel free. There is a GoFundMe link below and a PayPal link, and those will be in operation. You'll notice a bunch of money on the GoFundMe link because I've used this for 3 years now for different projects. So, and if I get rid of it, if it stops, it's so hard for me to get it started again from Georgia. So it doesn't pay for me to send it back to zero. Well, let's play a piece of music here. Oh, no, actually, let's not play a piece of music. let's play a little puppetry here. This is a 1-minute piece by the Quay brothers, who I am not only familiar with, but have become friends with over the years. And this is just called Stille Nacht, which means silent night in Germany. It's only 1 minute long. We'll be back in just a moment. I find that fascinating. And what's interesting about that is they animate metal shavings, little splinters of metal. I just like, one of the things that struck me, this is why the Quay brothers are so influential to me, is I realized that the grammar of puppetry has expanded. And I think people traditionally have thought of little homunculi characters, little animals and things like that, which of course it must contain. But what I remember, before I left New York City in 1996, I started getting interested in puppetry before I knew how much puppetry was actually in New York. And I look back now and go, oh, I should have gone to the Czech American one. I should have gone to the Henson Festival, which was operating back then. But I didn't know all this stuff. I was coming in through the Schrankmeyer Quay door, and I did not grow up with puppets at all, except a few things on television. Like there was this kind of Sunday morning Christian animated puppet thing called Davy and Goliath. And there were things like that, but basically, and when I look back at King Kong, that was totally a puppet show, but when I got interested because I started seeing. First, I was just like, oh, animation, but then I started saying maybe it's more than the animation, maybe it's the images themselves, the moving matter, the puppets, but also the other things that they would animate. Schrankmeyer is notorious for animating things like egg beaters and stones and such. And the Quay brothers, obviously, if you're using magnets and metal shavings as part of your animation, that's pretty advanced level stuff. So, and fortunately, in New York, I did see Vietnamese water puppets, which was fun. That was great. That was like the only major thing I saw there. But I remember going to one, it was at NYU, they were having some puppet performance. And I don't remember the performance at all because it wasn't memorable. It was some student performance where nothing interesting happened, which is tough. But what I remember is the anticipation of waiting for a puppet show. And there was just a little, like, a little block on the stage. And I thought to myself, anything could move. And they could start telling a story. And that's what began to really impress me about puppetry. But it wasn't until the year, in 1996, before I left New York, I did take a quick trip to France and went to a Guignol play there. And the thing about that Guignol play, again, I don't remember it. And one of the reasons I don't remember it is because they were using pre-recorded sound. and the guignol and all the voices were happening. Whereas later, when I have my friend Pascal Prouveau in Paris, and I saw his show, and it wasn't pre-recorded sound. It was just him, and he was really interacting with the kids. And he said he had often used the guignol character to actually like put children in their place to talk to them. And I said, oh, we talk about interactivity. This is real interactivity.
Yeah, the nature of live performance, of sharing the air. You had mentioned earlier, just talking about the short piece of breath. I mean, these are the things that set live performance apart, of the interaction, the interplay of the audiences, and being in a performance that one time when all the cylinders are firing off. It's a magical moment, and like what you're describing, the ability to, even in a bad play, to capture a sense of wonder or delight of the unexpected. If it's recorded, your brain is still communicating that, oh, well, whatever, even if it, made you jump a little bit, it was still something that was pre-planned.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that you can't capture that in the pre-recorded, which is one reason why I am going to have a puppet festival later this year here in October. And I'm inviting French and Czech puppeteers here, as well as all the local Georgian puppeteers to do a festival. And I think that what I'd like the people from other countries to see is I'd like them to see Georgian puppetry, but also Georgia itself, TBILISI. But I'd like the Georgian puppeteers to see how people in other countries do things. And that's fascinating to me. And if I'm lucky, I'd like to be able to get some Sicilian marionettes here, because their style is just like crazy loud. They have all these soldiers fighting each other. And it's just the loudest thing possible. And there's no amplification.
Well, and you're talking about, bringing books and puppets from Georgia through customs. I can just imagine, little small people completely armored with sharp knives coming through, shoved in suitcases.
Yeah, they're not in suitcases, but they are in boxes. And when I think if I think too long about bringing this stuff through customs, I start to get afraid. So I'm not thinking about it, because I know I'm going to be stopped, and I know I'm going to get all sorts of bizarre questions about what's in all these boxes. I mean, I have literally hundreds of boxes of books and records and such. And sometimes I wonder why I chose to do all this. Why am I moving my stuff literally across time zones to do this?
Well, you're prompting yourself a question right there.
Yeah.
So, what is in this age, I think you've talked about it many times about, the material matters. Mm-hmm. And in the age in which we're living, just answer your own question. What is the importance of having a physical library?
Right.
I think you'd mentioned it some in your last video, but
right.
Why not here too?
Yeah. Well, even here, I've managed, you can't really see it because the sun hasn't come up yet, but behind me there's what I built of a library over the last 5 years. And some people will say, oh, that's a big library. I go like, no, that's not a big library. You wait till the real library shows up. But even with this stuff here, people immediately will go like, they'll see it, they'll walk in and go, ooh, puppeteers immediately. And I've had connections with Georgian puppeteers, but also Russian puppeteers will immediately go over there and just immediately look at all these mysterious books on puppetry and theater and such that I've got, and art, because they recognize how hard it is to find these things. And just as a matter of note, if you want to have a collection of books that will appreciate and value, collect puppetry books. As you know, because you got one of the copies. Did you get one or both of the Henryk Yarkowski History of Puppetry in Europe?
So yeah, I bit the bullet, and I got both 1 and 2, and I've been after my son because he's far more. He assures me that he can, in like lightning, snap pictures of the book and consolidate them into a document that I'm more than happy to share with folks. But but getting him to do that has been quite a task.
Yeah. Do you know the reason why those books are so valuable now?
Was it his wife?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She just refuses to let his stuff be printed anymore. And I think part of the reason for that was because, we'll just say some personal things behind the stage, and she's kind of getting back at his memory. So, but this is life. I have the one book which is really common aspects of, I think, the theater or puppet theater or something like that. I don't remember the exact name, which I recommend.
Yeah, aspects of puppet theater is what it's called.
Right. Yeah, but when I go to the Czech Republic, I find all sorts of fascinating puppet books, and I think I've shown a few of them in some of my videos, but they are, and they'll often have English translations with them or accompanying them in some manner. And it's something that's kind of fun to do, to collect them and to have them as something that is, it makes a nice library, but also the knowledge that's on there. Yeah, try to find that online.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me that's Yarkowski. One of his, prime things is, he was there in Europe and went and looked at a lot of primary texts that I don't know that we still have, or I mean, I am far too ignorant of language to be able to go across Europe and all the different. I would be more than happy to look at all the pictures, but to be able to digest the wealth of information that is in libraries across Europe, and he was able to go and look at that and digest that information pretty well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I met him, and I have on the Gravity from Above channel 2 of my interviews with him, and I spent a couple of days with him. Turns out a couple of years before he died, and that material is very important now because it's some of his last thoughts on puppetry. And I didn't put that out while he was alive because I was saving it, but now I feel like I have a duty to have it more publicly available because it's so hard to get his books and things. So, but I just felt honored to be with him. Also realizing that he was present during the Warsaw Uprising as a teenager, and saw 250,000 people died in that event. And it's just, when you realize, oh my goodness, I talked to him a little bit about it, but it's hard. I was there to talk about puppetry more than reminisce about the war. But nevertheless, it's obviously something that really affected him. And I think this is what makes Tadeusz Kantor's ideas very important as well, because he understood what was going on at Auschwitz during the war. He was there. He wasn't in the camp, but he knew what was going on. It was a tough time. And his last name could certainly be interpreted as being Jewish, although he wasn't. And so it's, I've found when I visited Poland, it was like everywhere I walked, and I've got some Polish ancestry. It was just like the ground was bleeding history. It was just so much had happened there. And of course, another part of me is Ukrainian as well. So it's like, jeepers, these places,
So the strings run deep.
Yeah.
In the marionette of your life.
Yeah. So what kind of puppetry are you working on these days? Yeah, got anything?
Well, in the past few years, I was able to help with, in Waco, Texas, we got a grant from Mid-American Arts to do some large-scale parade puppets. So I made with another individual, we designed and made a flock of grackles. And so for those of you who don't know what a grackle is, think of essentially a raven, but with very iridescent, smaller, but with very iridescent feathers.
Okay. Are they in the corvid family?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and it's mainly because in Waco, we have, we're on their seasonal migration, and so they'll take over, and it's super fascinating if you're at the right time of year and you go to the grocery store. It is literally a sea of black in the in the parking lot, and you can drive your car slowly. I'm not diagonally across it, and you can just draw lines because they'll just move far enough out of the way for your car to pass or for your footpath to go.
So you made large grackles?
Mm-hmm. and then we and the project was to make them out of recycled materials. And of course, it was a difficult project because there were two of us who have a history and a knowledge of puppet and performance, which is always an important thing. People know how to make beautiful things, but when you're talking about, carrying it for 2.5 hours over 4 miles, you need somebody who kind of knows what it's going to be like in there. And so having that discussion with other people who were not puppet adjacent, we'll call them, or whatever, was fun. I designed a large Colombian mammoth, think of a woolly mammoth, that I could not finish because we were in the process of moving. And so I handed it over to somebody and they destroyed it. It was a beautiful thing that became horrible. A few years ago, you're familiar with the cycle plays of the medieval period,
yes.
Okay. So I designed the puppets for the Wakefield Master's Second Shepherd's play.
Cool.
Did a whole bunch of about 4 or 5 sheep. We had one sheep that was a principal performed, and then a baby Jesus that came out at the end. So that was kind of fun. But recently, here in Fort Worth, there's a small, very hippy-dippy outdoor theater called the Hip Pocket Theater. And the artistic director of it is Lake Simmons, who she does a lot of puppetry in the New York scene.
So her first name is Lake?
Lake, yeah.
Okay.
I did say hippy-dippy.
Parents.
I did qualify that. And so she does a lot of, very, brings up another conversation. She does not like pretentious things. And so she does very simple object theater and very simple puppets. And but it's beautiful. It's elegant. She's worked a lot with Basil Twist. And this summer, or not this summer, this fall, Chris Green and Aaron Orr, they're both puppet performers and puppet artists in New York, came down, and we did a small outdoor pageant. And that's kind of what we've been, what I've been able to be up to recently.
I have books back in Alaska, the books I'm trying to bring here with the fundraiser, hint. But I have several on that have a lot of woodcuts and other things related to the medieval period. Mm-hmm. And one of them shows like the medieval pageant cart, which I find a really fascinating concept, the idea of a cart. Here they call it a budragana, which is a rolling, it was a wagon that was a cart that was also for performance. And so the name of my friend's hand shadow puppet theater here is Budragana Gagra. Okay. And Gagra is named after a town that was kind of destroyed in the Civil War by the Russians and others. There's still a part of Georgia that's kind of been carved off into Abkhazia, which was always kind of a part of Georgia. So there's that whole tradition of a cart or a vehicle, wagon of some sort that could also then immediately turn into a performance piece, I think is a fascinating concept. And one that should be revived in some sort of manner. Although in America, the problem is you often need permits to do these things. And in Georgia, you don't.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love like just reading about things that have gone on in the medieval period, particularly in theater. I love the fact. I don't love the fact that the Christian faith both killed theater and then resurrected it.
Yeah,
in the Western context.
Right. Well, you have to understand what theater was like in Rome, though. And in Rome, it was pornographic, scatological. It was there mostly to make really lewd political statements on the outside. And your puppets had full-blown sexual organs and all of this sort of stuff, yeah. Which is why you can kind of see the Christians would be like, no, we don't want anything to do with this. However, certain traditions stayed alive kind of in folk culture, eventually resurrected in medieval Christian culture, and then became part of the church. So much so that I think it was the Council of Trent, although I'm still looking for the exact text that says this, put a prohibition on the performances in the church. Mm-hmm. So, which makes sense to me. I wish some of the Christian ministries that do performances in the church would not do them in the church, because right.
They just need some wagons in the parking lot.
Exactly.
We were here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. My son was looking up, these churches that had, live camels brought through the church. Mm-hmm. And I thought he was making things up, but he was like, no, this church has elves on strings and they're swinging them across the sanctuary. I mean, it's sanctuary I use in broad terms. It was probably a mall that was purchased and repurposed.
Yeah, I went to a little church in Alaska, a Presbyterian church, and it was a friendly, inclusive place. Anybody could come there. The music was for everybody. It was kind of pathetic too. I mean, every now and then Christmas would come around and be singing all the classic stuff, and I'd be like, thank you. But some of the newer stuff, I was just like, and just the small church version of the mega church style is just like, oh no, this is just painful. But one thing I noticed in contrasting the Georgian Orthodox Church here with that church there is that when you walk into a Georgian Orthodox church, they are generally dark inside. And there's a big vault over you that's dark. And you've got candles everywhere. And it's mystery.
Yeah.
Whereas if you walk into your average Protestant church in America, that word is one you're not going to associate with the proceedings. Right. There's no mystery to God because he's our friend, which it seems to me there's a place in the middle there where you can have a little bit more friendliness in the church and a little less casualness in the church.
Yeah. Well, it's to me, I always think of it in terms of, in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, when they come across Aslan and, they have this beautiful, C.S. Lewis does this beautiful page-long description of the majesty of this lion and the awe of this lion. And I believe it's the youngest one is asking, well, is he safe? And it's like, no, he's not safe, but he's good, and it's this. Right.
Yeah. It's the idea also
both terrifying and comforting in the same moment.
Yeah. Well, it's also the idea that God is not tame.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of thing. See, I want puppet shows like that. I want to see puppetry where it's like you're really sitting there wondering what in the world's going on. So I haven't quite seen it yet. I've made some little experiments along that way. I think the thing I did that's I enjoyed doing the most was I created, when I brought puppetry from my European trips back to Alaska, now the environment is totally different. And I knew I couldn't just immediately do the kind of European puppetry I was seeing, especially like the more philosophical stuff, the artistic stuff. I just said, unfortunately, Americans just aren't prepped for that culturally. So what do? I said, well, where's the place where the European culture meets the American culture? And I said, it's in the carnival, it's in the sideshow, it's in the the circus, all of that sort of stuff. So I said, okay, well, let's make this the puppet sideshow. And so also the other problem is in Alaska in the summer, everyone is so busy that it's very difficult to find a time for everyone to get together at the same time because everyone's trying to make money then. So what I said is, okay, here's what we'll do. You make an idea. We'll have little exhibits each, and then we'll have one master of ceremonies. And you make something, and you make something, and you make something, and I'll make something. And then we will have one thing after another, like a sideshow. It's just like, ladies and gentlemen, and then point to your strange, the incredible turkey man, which is one puppet I did. So the human turkey. But one I did later was this, I found this huge like mason jar that was much bigger than normal. I, take my face, make it out to here, go up to there, very big. And I filled it part full of water and part full of used motor oil that I found down at the docks where they saved the motor oil. And then I illuminated it from behind with a black light, ultraviolet light. And then I had these old leather work gloves, and I attached to them the tips of deer antlers, three different ones. I turned my hand basically into three, and then and then what I did was, so I had those, and then what was the other thing? Oh, I didn't put them directly. I had like these rubber tubing that I had coming at the end of them. So when I did this in the water, you would see it like this very strange shape. It was very, very odd. So then what I did was I took half of the jar and filled it with this motor oil. Now, if you know water and oil, the oil goes to the top. So I hid it inside the oil. And then I would do this. I would start with one finger and it would go down and this tube would go down. Then it would immediately come back up. But the strange thing is then the oil goes down and comes back up as well. And you've got this weird glow. So, and I hid my hand by putting the a curtain across the top of the jar, this huge jar. So then I would do this again and I would bring it up, and that really got a reaction out of people when I was really happy. And then for the last show, unfortunately, it didn't occur to me before then, but at the last show, it occurred to me to take it out. So it came out of the top, and it was this weird creature that everyone was just like, "Whoa!" you know. But what I liked about that was it was the kind of thing that nobody had ever seen before. And it was extremely mysterious. It was not predictable. It was not safe. And I often think puppeteers often do things in a very theatrical manner. And I think one of the reasons I like what Tadeusz Kantor was saying was that it's like sometimes the problem with the theatrical manner, and this is where he talks about what the original modernist puppeteers were trying and theater people were trying to do, was to break that. You know, you come to a theater, the lights go down, you're ready for the theatrical experience. And what I think they were trying to do, and I think this is what was happening in the constructivist period and such, as they were trying to break down those expectations. And the way Kantor talks about it is that they were trying to break down the fiction, the wall between fiction and reality. But what he says actually happened is they ended up creating a more fiction. So, and in a sense, you could look at this as part of the whole modernist dilemma itself, is that while trying to get down to the bottom of things, and you can see this even in modern science, where, you know, after a while people are going further and further and further and further into things, and after a while it's like, no, it's molecules, it's DNA, it's subatomic particles, and we've gotten all this, and then after a while people see life as being abstract and weird, and that's a fiction because that isn't life. You know, I would say for most people, subatomic particles are about as real. I mean, I would say ghosts are probably more real to them, you know, because they don't have, you know, what are you actually imagining when you think subatomic particles? Not that they're not real, but it's just that it's become so abstract. And so in a way, that combined with all the other reductionist techniques and technologies that have, you know, pulled things apart. You know, you often hear people say things are a social construct now. Well, we've made them such. We've made them a fiction, but they aren't. It's just this is what we've done with them. And the point is, as Hans Rookmacher says, you know, how do you get back to the real reality? The reality, you know, when you look at water, you don't see H2O. You know, you see everything but that. You know, who knows what hydrogen and oxygen look like? You know? So for me, doing puppetry is about restoring the value of the object. And I think that's what Tadeusz Kantor was also saying. And he has a whole theory about what he calls the poor object. The object, and for him, the poor object would be like the McDonald's cup that's thrown away in the parking lot. You know, how do we revive the value of that? And he says, the thing about his use of puppets is he says they are death. And the only way to understand life is through death, which is also, curiously enough, what I think the cross is as well. So, but deep level.
Yeah.
Let's take a break there. We'll come back. And so since we're here talking about deep level puppet stuff, by the way, contribute, please. So far, no one has contributed on the show because what happens is I can see what happens. I'm watching the numbers. Someone will come on for a moment, go like, and then go up. Because if they're from the Anadromous channel, they're in the middle of an actual conversation. They don't know where it started or where it's going. They will eventually when I put it on that channel. But if they're coming from this channel, they don't know what to expect. And here we are talking. Again, we're in the middle of things. But hey, that's fine with me. We're having a pretty good conversation, I think. And let me play you a little of what I consider the most frightening puppeteer of all. Do you know who that is?
No.
It's a German woman named Ilka Schönbein.
Oh, yeah. I have her down. Like, I was going to ask you thoughts of her because I know you've mentioned her in the past.
Yeah,
but
no, she is.
you never commented on her.
I was told that the people in Charleville-Mézières at the International Puppetry Institute there know her, but she's very hard to get in touch with. And she lives in some sort of strange world herself. I think she keeps traveling or something. I don't know how it works. But anyway, and this is a 4-minute piece. We'll watch this, then we'll come back and we'll kind of wind things up for the end here. But a reminder, please contribute to this fundraiser. There's a GoFundMe link below, PayPal, and if you give $50 or more, I will give you 50 Georgian music files. If you give 100, I will give you 100. I can go up to $200. If you give more, I can only go to 200 music files. But we, out of a $12,000 goal, we have over $8,000. And right now I'm working my way towards getting the $2,000 we need to get the truck and train from the coast and the workers to bring the stuff to my house here and to get through customs. So please contribute. Meanwhile, here's Ilka Schönbein. For you, this is evening. For me, it's morning, but it doesn't matter. Let's watch it.
Reste avec moi jusqu'à musique.
So there you are. I would say, you know, in every art form, there are people who are on the edge of their art form. She's definitely on one of the edges of the puppet art form, and that's the tame stuff. I have a book.
Oh, yeah.
There is a book you can find. I would look for it. It has amazing photos in France. If you go to some place like Abe Books and type in Ilka Schönbein, you'll find it. And it's an amazing book of just her work. And yeah, you're just like, whoa, incredible stuff. And obviously not for everyone. I think it would be very funny for someone who's used to the Muppets or something to show up at one of her shows.
Well, a friend of mine teaches art at the local art center, and does projects with young kids, and she was, what's the famous artist with the wave from the Edo period in Japan? You know what I'm talking about?
I know who you're talking about, but the name escapes me.
Okay, yeah, I can't think of the name. And I just reminded her that, we live in the age of the internet, and if they look up that artist, I mean, he did innumerable amounts of erotic prints. And so, they may be trying to look up, oh yeah, I saw this great picture of a wave, and get a little bit more of an eyeful than they were.
Yeah, I think when you just say to
for
Japanese wave, you conjure up this kind of aquamarine thing with the very graphic design, and but yeah, indeed. And
that was I hadn't ever seen that piece that you had shown of hers, but yeah, it's still remarkably quote unquote creepy, but and a little disconcerting, but it is very much mild compared to a lot of her work.
Yeah, exactly. And she has this kind of aura around her. She's somewhere between performance art and puppetry, but a very Germanic kind of Gothic edge. And so, but I have a great deal of respect for that, because she has taken it to a certain kind of logic, and I would be fascinated to, if I ever met her, I'd be really fascinated to talk about, her origins and this sort of thing. Evidently, it's tough to find her because she keeps herself kind of hidden, which reminds me of the musician Diamanda Gallis in New York City, doing this crazy kind of avant-garde operatic stuff mixed with blues and things, and if you ever see her work, it's just like, wow. So
and she's so remarkably committed to her craft, whether, and that's one of the things to look at any of these performers, is that, whether you quote unquote like it or not, watch, what she's doing, how she's committed to her body and the embodiment, both of the character of herself in those, and the care for the object and bringing it to life.
Yeah. Well, I have a way I approach pretty much everything that's creative in art, in any form of art or entertainment. And that is, and I applied this, I just did 2 written essays about Taylor Swift. And I plan to turn those into videos as well. But my basic rule is, I talk about them as if I were talking with them. That is to say, as if I was meeting them, rather than as someone. It's so easy, I noticed, for people to just, if they see something in a movie or a film, or a movie and a film, I guess would be the same. If they see, a musician or any kind of project, even just YouTubers' content, they will just suddenly think, oh, I can say whatever I want about it, which could be ridiculously high flattery, or it could be just, just this attack because I don't like this thing. And the internet gives you a kind of an anonymity, so you feel you can do that. But my feeling is, no, there are always human beings here. And what I've discovered in life is I've met enough of them that, hey, they would like to be talked about like they were a human being, and not just some sort of archetypal object, or just some sort of thing to be, looked at objectively. And so for me, if I was to talk with her, I can't critique her like her work is just too frightening and scary. It's just like, no, that's not what she's trying to do, any more than Taylor Swift is trying to be this, whatever Taylor Swift is trying to be. If I ever talked to Taylor Swift, I would have a serious conversation about music, but also about, how big do you think you want to be? Why are you doing this? On a very human level. Not being super critical. There is a place for being critical to a person's face, but you don't start there, unless the person is really a problem. There are some people out there, but the problem is today we're far too quick to designate people as being evil or beyond the pale or outside or demonic or homophobic or whatever it is we tar them with. And for my money, you have to treat the work of people as the work of human beings, even if no one else will. So, but that's a different order. But still, so when it comes to puppetry, the nice thing about puppeteers is most of them you can talk to. Again, there's a basic humility in the craft. Even what she's doing is you'd never be able to recognize her walking down the street. So it's that idea of doing something. And I think, like I say, the best place for a puppet show is a smaller venue rather than a larger venue, and it allows more connection.
No, I really enjoyed you talking about what was it, putting together a puppet troupe or whatever, but really thinking again about the scale of the audience in proportion to the stage, we'll say, or the puppets, really going, that makes a whole lot of sense. Because, you do get these haunting thoughts about, well, if I'm going to put, all this energy into, say, a little 6-inch tall, crafted little puppet, for a project, you really can't, perform that in Carnegie Hall or whatever, it doesn't lend itself to that. Right. And that's a lot of effort, for, but it just depends what what the value is on the work.
Well, yes. And that's why I think puppetry is the perfect antidote to so much of the virtual stuff we see, because, you can film your show. I think a filmed puppet show has to be different. I mean, I really love the Quay brothers and the Schrankmeyer and other animators because they understand what they're doing with their puppets. They're making it for the film, but loaded with texture and character. Whereas puppetry is really a sacrificial kind of art because you're not going to get rich on it. I mean, what happened with the Hensons is, well, they went in two dimensions that I have a problem with, and one is the cute dimension, and the other is, kind of scaling this. There's a problem with scaling puppetry up from a small show. Mm-hmm. And I think there are ways it can be done. One is there's repetition, but even still, how much can you make on a puppet show? Right. And I mean, even if some of the most expensive marionette shows I've seen are like the Salzburg Marionette Theater, and they charge about €35 for the cheap seats. Now that's for most people watching a puppet show. That's say between $35 and $40, depending on the exchange rate. That's a lot of money for a puppet show. Most people aren't going to pay that. So, unless you got that, and even they have to kind of cater to the tourist market. So they ended up doing a Sound of Music, which went against their basic doing operas version of a puppet show. So I think that, but it is, it's totally counter to this mediated age. And that's why I think it's so important. It's like we need the object. I'm really happy to see that on one hand, they're killing physical media. You know, a company like Netflix is literally just going like, where's that physical media? And they're stabbing it. You know, we don't want you to buy Blu-rays and DVDs anymore. Nor do we want you to go to the movie theater. Yeah. We want you to stay at home and just surf the waves. And to me, that's just evil. You know, you get, and people, more and more, people are having real problems with loneliness because they're isolated, just watching the stuff. And you know what, among other things, what a puppet show does is get you out of the house. Yeah. And put you in a small place where there's really literal physical objects there and you're with other people. And those are just, in this day and age, what was just the height of normality at one point is now a radical act to be with other people. And it's going to get worse.
Right.
As technology becomes more invasive, intrusive.
I guess that's that makes me think of one of the questions I was wondering. In your imagination, what is your dystopian dream? Meaning, like, you know, some people, it's technology advancing beyond and beyond. I have a tendency to lean towards the future primitive, you know, of it all the electrical and digital collapsing, and maybe that's a hopeful thought. But
I know exactly what you mean. No, I have a tendency to have it as a two-pronged thing. I think that the official future will continue on and on into this technological surround sound thing where you're just totally immersed. Like there's a new Apple Vision Pro or something like this that's just come out, and it's about walking around with these goggles and being in augmented reality, you know, like the Pokemon game that was played a couple years back. So that, and this thing is really, it's being rolled out, and if you start seeing people walking down the street wearing these weird goggles, you'll know what you're seeing. But the point is, you know, I often say to myself, well, what is the point of humanity if we are all just plugged into the internet all the time? How does anybody make any money? You know, I mean, I know that in order to make a video, I've got to stop, observe some things. You know, you can't just watch movies all day or YouTube or whatever and make anything. You have to interact with the world to make something, even a video. So, you know, that's one of the reasons I have a lot of critiques of the Matrix because of its Gnosticism. But one of the things I found interesting was that humans are being used as batteries. And in a way, there's a logic to that, because more and more we are simply, like right now, everyone's trying to monetize the number of eyes watching what you're doing on a screen. So that YouTube is becoming filled more and more with ads. I don't see them on my computer because I have an ad block, but I don't on the smart phone television that I have. And so I see, it's just like, jeepers, this is like a half-hour thing, and I've gotten 4 commercial breaks in it. This is much worse than television. You know, at least in television, you knew where they would roughly be. But the problem is that how far can this go before nobody's working anymore? And what do you do with the people, humanity, then? And you start getting visions of like Soylent Green or the Matrix, where we're just being used. You know, what if it doesn't matter if billions of people are watching something if no one's working, because they can't afford whatever it is people are trying to sell or do. So I think this can only go on so far. I think we need, I don't want to use the word movement, but reality, what can I say? I want to say movement, but that's just the wrong word. We need a reality revival. We need a reality, a virtual rejection and a reality check. And we need to start getting back to the material world. And the further we go down this other world, the more lost we will be. However, I'm with you. I think we can only go so far down this road. What we're seeing is the more and more we're plugged in, the more psychological damage we are experiencing. And that will create, well, we already see what it's creating. It's creating a massive homeless problem on our streets. It's creating, the problems I've seen in like fashion right now has terrible problems. What is it? There's some huge amount, like 60% of the garbage is these fibers that are made. 60% of all the micro plastic fibers are coming from clothing. This athleisure wear. This stretchy, spandexy stuff that we have too much of. We are awash in fast fashion, so that something as simple as, it's not simple, but something like fashion. And I want to do something on this at some point. But travel is another thing. Why are people going everywhere? But why at the same time are, say, towns in the middle of America being evacuated by people who say there's nothing to do here? Well, if you had a puppet theater there would be. And a puppet theater would be a great fit for a small Midwestern town. But I'm just spitballing here. But, the point is this. We need reality. And my feeling is, and reality isn't just this, the hard nuts and bolts of stuff, but it's also all the spiritual stuff as well. Because the internet isn't very spiritual. This is good. This would be not like a real conversation. Because for one thing, there's not much you can do for me. You're, thousands of miles away. I am glad for this. I'm glad to be able to meet you. But I'd much rather be with you in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And reality will break back through, and it may have to break back through catastrophe.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like a good place to end this. James, thank you for coming aboard. So I guess we ended on a down note, but hey, puppets.
No, catastrophe, What's so down about that? We're talking about, the fall of the digital community so that we can have our puppet shows. I mean, exactly. That's a positive note.
Yeah. Well, one thing, I'm going to make a video in the near future on puppetry and just some of the remarks I've collected from puppeteers over the years in my Gravity from Above project, where they talk about the need for the physical and the simple. And that's where puppetry is. So I'm going to say goodbye at this point. I want to make this just short enough so, well, it doesn't matter on this channel because it doesn't go anywhere. But thanks for spending time, James. I really appreciate it. And I hope someday we can meet in reality, in the flesh, in the material world.
I can tell you that whenever you posted about folks coming to Georgia, it's a temptation.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do it again. So
one of these days, maybe you'll decide to make some money by doing a European puppet tour, and maybe that will finally wet my whistle.
There's an idea. Here is something though. When I come to America to get my stuff, it's going to take something like 3 months, 2 months or 3 months. I'm hoping not that long, but that's just the reality of it, to get my stuff from there to here. So what I'm hoping is, and I'm going to put this out there very soon, is if someone wants me to come to their community and talk or do something, if you can raise a bit of money for me to cover my costs, I'll leave America the slow way. So
that's great.
Okay. James,
peace.
have a good evening.
Yeah,
I will have a good day. The sun is just starting to come out here, so
yeah. Peace to you on this Tuesday morning, then. All right.
as the Georgians say, "Kagad ikavi," which means yeah. So there you are. I thought that was quite an excellent discussion. Some of the points may have left you saying, what are they talking about? And who are those people they're talking about? Well, if you go back to the last actual video I made on theatrical beings in a fictional world, you will find that I mentioned some of those people there and what this is about. So if you put this and that together, you'll have a very good picture of some very important things related to the reality that we live in and the importance of physical entertainment and physical contact. So, from Tbilisi, Georgia, where we say droabit, which means temporarily, we will meet again. Nachwamdis.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.